Did you know that owning a dog makes your home a happier, healthier, and safer place to live? The Kunal Patel Group believes in finding the right home for you, and also in finding homes for dogs. Through their partnership with Sixa, they do just that. Well, on this episode of Decoding Dayton, we're going to look at the lost Decoding Dayton. We're going to meet up with Andrew Walsh, who just wrote a book, Lost Dayton, aptly named. And so we're going to learn from him. There's a lot that we think we know about Dayton, right? We think we know the Oregon District, we know some of the other historic districts in town. This guy is going to teach us about some things that we should know about, some things we've forgotten. I've got my press cortada here. I'm ready to go. Let's see what we find out from Andrew. Dude, we're on this island.
Yeah, we're here on the island. We're at the intersection of 5th and Wayne.
Yeah.
And this is actually one of my favorite sites here in Dayton that sort of got me started on some of my research.
Okay.
Right behind us is
the Dublin pub.
Is the Dublin pub. And
Can you do the Irish?
not so much. I am a quarter Irish, but don't really have the jig down. But
Okay.
This is actually one of the parts of Dayton that was transformed probably more than any other. It used to be this very old neighborhood called the Haymarket.
Really?
Right in between today's Oregon District and St. Anne's Hill.
So we moved off the island.
Yeah, this is a little better.
Yeah, a little more room. So tell me about this Haymarket. How big was this area?
Well, so it was a neighborhood that extended pretty much from south of 5th to the east of Wayne and kind of all the way across Kiowee, sort of to the middle of where Baumberger Park is today.
Okay.
And it was a very early neighborhood, about mid-1800s.
Okay.
It had a diverse group of businesses along 5th and down Wayne. And another interesting thing about the Haymarket was that it was the location of Dayton's red light district of the time.
A little bit risque.
A little bit. So that was on a street that was called Pearl Street, which was kind of one of
Okay.
those diagonals. It started at 5th and went over to Wayne.
Right.
And it was a pretty small street, just a few blocks long, but it was said to have, I believe, 38 brothels.
38?
Yes.
Jeez.
So many of them were just large, beautiful Victorian homes, and from what I read, many people would kind of stroll down the street admiring the houses and be very unaware of what was actually going on inside
on
them.
the inside.
So this is one of the few remnants that's left. If you see kind of these bricks here, that would be
It was a
one of the-
cobblestone street.
Yeah, so this would be really one of the few parts of the Haymarket that there's still really any trace of. Other than that, it's been radically transformed.
So now we're going to talk about Steele High School, I think. We're going to get all the facts on that because it had one of my most favorite things, and that's Leo the Lion. But I don't want to steal all your thunder, man. Tell us about Steele High School. How's it spelled?
S-T-E-E-L-E.
Okay.
Steele.
Named after?
Robert Steele,
Okay.
I believe. So
Nice.
we're right here. We've got this picturesque view across the Great Miami to downtown Dayton. And if you look right where the first CareSource building is, the big glassy tower, that was pretty much the exact location of Steele High School, which was a beautiful old building constructed in the 1890s. It was a Romanesque revival style. It kind of had the look of a castle. It had these turrets and very grand looking building.
I remember. Pretty awesome. Yeah.
So as you mentioned, Leo the Lion was one of its more prominent features. So this was a sculpture that was created soon after the school was built. And what was kind of the funny story there was they spent so much on the building, especially for the time for a school building, that they had very little left to kind of decorate the interior and get art and things like that.
Right.
So they ended up commissioning a famous sculpture artist who was inspired by a lion design from, I believe, the Bronx Zoo in New York City. And to raise some of the funds, they actually had the students at Steele High School would raise a couple $100, mostly in nickels, from what I heard, to help create this art that would be part of their school. So they created Leo the Lion. He stood guard for many years, but the big problem for Steele High School, as with many downtown buildings, was the Great Flood of 1913. So the school was badly damaged, and it was rebuilt and reopened, but it, from what I understand, never really fully recovered. So there were a couple interesting teachers actually at Steele High School. So Catherine Wright, who is the sister of Wilbur and Orville Wright, she taught Latin there for about a decade in the early 1900s.
Wow.
And then another really cool teacher was Dr. Eleanor G. Brown, and she was the first blind person to graduate from Ohio State. And then after getting her teaching license, came back to Dayton and taught several subjects at Steele for many years. So she was a very well-known character
Awesome.
in Steele's history.
So we made it here to the Couscous Colony.
Not exactly. So we're here on the site that was once called the Kossuth Colony.
Kossuth.
Or Kossuth, if
Depending.
you want to pronounce it the American way.
Definitely
or
not couscous.
But
right.
ethnically, it was primarily Hungarians who lived here. And it was a pretty interesting experiment in kind of the settlement of immigrants in Dayton's history, where it was a settlement that was completely walled in. So it was sort of like a city within a city. And all of the workers who came here, they all were employed by one company, the Barney and Smith Car Works. And the colony was really created just by one man. His name was Jacob Moskowitz, who was a labor recruiter. And he actually got his start in Dayton working on the west side of town for a different company, where he kind of created a little settlement for some of the new workers who are new to the U.S., and he gave them a home and sort of a sense of community. But the big question that really came up was whether this Jacob Moskowitz character was really doing the immigrant workers a favor, or if he was possibly exploiting them. So they actually had to do all of their shopping at that company store. They cashed in their paychecks and got these special tokens to buy everything, and if they had packages coming in, people would actually take the packages, and if there was something they could have bought at the store, they would be confiscated. But on the other hand, this was an age where there were a lot of very unscrupulous labor recruiters out there who were kind of scamming these immigrants with bad situations, and many were living in really cramped and dangerous tenement type situations. So you can sort of see it both ways.
Yeah, interesting. A lot to that.
Yeah, so we're here on West 5th Street,
Okay.
pretty close to the Wright Dunbar neighborhood,
Right.
In the commercial area up on 3rd Street, but we're down on 5th. And if you look around, there's really not much left. So a lot of people would be surprised to learn that this was basically the cultural center of the African-American population in Dayton for several decades. It was really a self-sufficient neighborhood, and it had a lot of businesses, a lot of churches, drugstores, bars, restaurants, and also two very iconic theaters. There was the Classic Theater and the Palace Theater. The Classic is interesting in that it was thought to be the first theater built in the United States that was solely built and operated by African Americans. And then the Palace Theater was much larger and built, I believe, the following year. Over the years, it had really big name acts come through. Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie.
Really?
They performed at the Palace. In the 1990s, the Classic was finally demolished. And one thing I came across in my research was that it was, people said goodbye to it in an interesting way. They actually held a funeral with a eulogy for this theater. So it was such an iconic building to some of the residents who remembered it back in the old days that I heard, 40 or 50 people came out and participated in this funeral ceremony for the lost theater.
So, I mean, this isn't everything in the book. The book's got so much. So where can people get your book?
Yeah, so you can get it in a few places. It's for sale at Carillon Park. If you're in the Oregon District, Hart Mercantile carries it. A few other shops, I think it's at the Air Force Museum, or if you're down in the suburbs, most of the big chain bookstores, Barnes and Nobles, they'll have it.
Right.
But also, if you want to get a copy from me, and I'm happy to sign it for people, I have a website called DaytonVistas.com.
Okay.
So I have the book up there, and you can get in touch with me there, and I'm happy to meet Daytonians around here if you want to chat. And
Lost Dayton.
Lost Dayton, Ohio is the book. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Yeah,
This
you're
has
welcome.
been great.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.